Welcome to Foundations and Functions Weekly Podcast, where we return to when medicine actually made you better. Now, here's Dr. Jason Amich and Dr. C.J. Pabla.
Hello, this is Dr. C.J. Pabla.
This is Dr. Jason Amich. Welcome to Better Medicine. This is our first podcast to share kind of our thoughts, our philosophy, and a lot about our practice, and to talk about things that are relevant and important to people every day. So one of our big philosophies at our practice is returning to when medicine actually made you better. And that has so much to do with our integrative approach to medicine and healthcare in general. So Dr. Pabla, tell us a little bit about why you started the practice, how you developed functional integrative medicine mindset.
Yeah, so I practiced emergency medicine for 18 years, and this is where Dr. Amich and I kind of connected. But we'd see a lot of chronic stuff in the emergency department, not necessarily acute stuff. Women that had gut problems, multiple CT scans, and no one can really find what's wrong. We could tell them what it's not, but what was it, right? So I started thinking about, like, why are so many chronic stuff in this country just handled with just medication? So that was kind of the philosophy. Is that could we work upstream and find root causes to these problems if we dug a little bit deeper? So that's kind of the philosophy behind our practice. We're not anti-medicine. I think medicines are great for stabilizing symptoms and getting people kind of stabilized. But, we kind of look at it as a Band-Aid. And then, what can we do to work upstream? So that's kind of my philosophy and Dr. Amich's philosophy. And we know the gut is linked to many things. Dr. Amich can kind of speak about that. But so that's kind of why I decided to get out of emergency medicine and deal more on the chronic side and look at more root causes for patients.
And I think we both had some personal experiences we can talk about. But I can remember a long time ago when we worked in the ER, we would have patients come in with sometimes pages, 2-3 pages of medicines. And I can remember even back then kind of thinking to myself that, gosh, you would think that if medicine solved problems, the more medicines you were on, the healthier you would be.
Right.
And it was never the case. The more medicines they were on, the worse off they were. So I know early on, we started kind of questioning our training and the standard medical model, 20 years ago, kind of going, does this really kind of make sense? And so, from my perspective, I kind of stumbled into integrative functional medicine just through, lots of different experiences that I had, including some hospital administration roles, and really getting to see what happens behind the scenes, how the insurance model affects healthcare, how it drives clinical decisions in healthcare organizations, looking at different types of healthcare models, from emergency medicine care, under EMTALA and all those things, all the way to cardiac and cardiovascular care, acutely and chronically. In those two areas, I would say in a lot of areas, the United States, we surpass every other country with our acute care model. When it comes to trauma, cardiovascular, heart attacks, strokes, when an insult occurs to people, we are, bar none, the top of the world in managing those.
Yeah.
But when it comes to preventing those things, we really, it's sad and embarrassing how terrible we really rank against other countries, even some of the countries that aren't necessarily considered first world countries. Yeah. So from that perspective, I kind of, really took into account, okay, so what else is out there? And that's kind of where I stumbled into functional medicine, integrative medicine, and really understood going into it that this is an approach where you start with basic physiology, right, basic biochemistry. Like, how do we actually make people better? You and I talk a lot about the systems biology approach, right? The whole body is connected. So you don't have a liver problem. You've got a body problem that manifesting in the liver, that sort of thing. So that was kind of my experience. And then also understanding the healthcare model today, I think, as a lot of people are acutely aware, isn't really about making you better. Yeah. So that's kind of where I came from. And I think you had some personal firsthand experience, maybe with some back injury or back pain. And so tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So like Dr. Amick said, chronic care, we basically manage symptoms, and do we actually get patients better? I snowboarded for many years, and I was having a lot of chronic low back pain, and went the traditional medicine route, did MRIs, which is important to look for structural issues, saw a back surgeon, and really wasn't getting any better until I saw a doctor that did myofascial release, and that made a world of difference. So, getting that done, getting a look at muscles that were inactivated, that weren't functioning right, made a big difference in my pain management, and I was able to get back into working out and being healthy. So, besides my personal journey, I realized that, what can we do to affect change? And, as a physician, I really didn't know a lot about nutrition. Right. So, you study a little bit of it in medical school, and I realized that the countries that do it well, the core is changing the way you eat. Eating not only, so what does it mean to eat healthy? And we can get into that down the road, but really eating whole foods and avoiding foods that tend to be inflammatory, and and it's harder and harder to eat healthy. And so that's kind of our take on it, really establishing a core of, good foods, some proper supplementation, and then really focusing on gut health.
Yeah. And, I've said for a long time, I continue to say, and I think the two worst things we say in medicine and healthcare is eat better and exercise.
Yeah.
Because no one really knows what any of that means.
Right.
And so, we have to take a really broad look at what does it mean to eat better? Well, it's not just, removing processed food and things that are bad for you, but it's also understanding how your body reacts to the foods you are putting in your mouth. Because again, from a systems biology approach, every single organism on this planet, and you can take a good hour and watch some really good TV programs about nature. And what you learn from just watching it, whether it's a butterfly or a snail or a capuchin monkey or whatever, they're intimately tied to their environment and what they eat, how they eat, and what's available to them. And that's something that, from a biological perspective, we've gotten away from.
Yeah.
And so there's absolutely a recourse when you're eating processed foods and chemicals and things that just aren't natural to your biology, and that has some long-term effects. So we see a lot of things in our practice, and we manage a lot of that, not just from a food and nutrition perspective, but a lot of chronic diseases. We talk a lot in here about inflammatory processes. We do a lot of disease management for patients, and I think one of the things that sets us apart from a lot of other practices is our deep understanding of the physiology, but also our ability to explain physiology to our patients and educate them.
Yeah. And, emergency medicine gives you a broad perspective on a lot of different pathology, because, as an ER doctor, you might see trauma in one room, and then you got a heart attack in another room, and you got ortho in another room. So it gives us a broad perspective. And also in graduate school, I studied a lot of physiology and biochemistry. And really, I think the battle is won when you look at the cellular level. How does toxins, how does inflammation affect the cellular level, and we spend a lot of time on Dr. Amick on whiteboards, kind of nerding out and drawing formulas and looking at organic molecules and looking at different pathways that are interrupted by inflammation or interrupted by toxins in our environment. And so I think this is not just some pseudoscience. This is actually science at its best, I believe, where you really have to understand the pathways. For example, B vitamins. What are they? Well, they're cofactors. They make enzymes more efficient. Minerals, they make enzymes more efficient. So when people tend to say, well, vitamins and minerals, how do they really impact you? Well, reactions in the body slow down when you don't have the cofactors. And a slowed down reaction could develop symptoms, which ultimately could develop disease. So, I think that's kind of our philosophy. We really like to research our patients and impart change. And this is where the philosophy comes in, is working upstream, looking at root causes. You come in with hypertension. Has anybody looked at sleep apnea? Has anybody looked at other secondary reversible causes? And we try to do that. So we're not just going to stop your antihypertensive, because that would be not healthy.
Right.
But if we can impart change and do the other things, then maybe we can wean you off the antihypertensive.
Yeah.
So,
again, returning to basic fundamental physiology and biochemistry. Returning to basic physiology and biochemistry means, not being afraid to revert back to the basics.
Right.
And again, like we keep saying, we tell people we're not anti-medicine, but understanding things like vitamin D and what does vitamin D do to your body, and all the things. Remember, vitamin D can act like an enzyme, it can act like a hormone, it can act like a vitamin. He's kind of a multiplayer. And so a lot of times when we see patients that have issues, we want to know, hey, what's your vitamin D? We find no one's ever checked their vitamin D level, right? They're on a bunch of different medicines or gels or creams or shots for this, that, or the other. And we look and their vitamin D's in the tank. And so, we say, gosh, if we fix those things, maybe you don't need to be on 5 medicines.
Right.
Because remember the rule of polypharmacy. Once you get above 3 medicines, I think everything else is interacting with each other and causing more problems. So again, I think that's where we really latch on the idea of getting back to when medicine, and not just medicine pills, but medicine care, medicine health,
Right.
Actually makes you better and gives you a longer health life.
How long do you live well? That's what we're trying to shoot for, improving your quality of life. But going back to the vitamin D, low vitamin D can cause mood disorders. So, you're on an antidepressant, but maybe once we correct your vitamin D, you could get off the antidepressant, or the antidepressant becomes more effective.
I think a lot of people in Indiana can relate to that, because everyone realizes they feel better about July,
Right.
August, when the sun is out and they're outside, they're feeling better. But just not understanding how that vitamin D actually plays a big part of all year long throughout our whole healthcare.
Yeah. So, that's kind of our philosophy is, really digging in and really trying to find root causes to help you.
So this is kind of our beginning podcast. It's going to be a little clunky, so thanks for sticking in there with us and being patient. We're going to perfect, our sound and our mode as best we can. But really, we just want to share who we are and what we do. And if that is helpful to anyone, that's God's work, and it's really what we're about. So thanks for listening. There's going to be so much more coming over the next few weeks and months, and we look forward to doing this for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't hesitate to reach out to us and say, hey, can you talk about vitamin D metabolism? Can you talk about gut health? And we're more than happy to look out there and what are people searching, what are people interested in, and we're more than happy to talk on that subject matter.
So again, thanks so much for spending time with us today, giving us your time and your attention for better health. So thanks again, and we'll sign off.
The information provided in this podcast is for educational and information purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. The content is not a substitute for professional medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. If you would like more detailed information, please contact Dr. Amich or Dr. Pabla at Integrative Medicine through their website at integrativemla.com.